a special, a special Joe and Joe weather show because it's a Joe and Bill show. We have National Weather Service meteorologist Bill Goodman is our special guest tonight. We're going to be talking about Hurricane Fiona as it nears Bermuda tonight and then on its way up to Atlantic, Canada, where we're going to see a landfall probably in Eastern Nova Scotia. We'll discuss all the mechanics surrounding this storm and what happens to it when it gets further north. Plus, we will be looking at a tropical wave in the Caribbean that has everybody's antennas up. We're watching it, and we'll let you know what's going to happen with that. And the current weather pattern, which, for a change, as autumn arrives, we have an autumn pattern. Now, there's a switch for the month of September. We haven't seen that in a while. All that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show with Bill Goodman, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, with everything you need to make sure that your home looks great, is working good or working well, and it's all ready to handle any kind of adverse weather, tropical storms or hurricanes or even just thunderstorms when they go by. It might be a good time, hint, hint, to make sure your generator is working, or maybe you still need to get one, or your sump pump, anything regarding hurricane preparedness. And, of course, if you're making your yard look good for the fall, plenty of mulch, plenty of topsoil in all different colors. 631-756-1125 is the phone number, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. And you have not been on this show in a long time. So the summer was a snooze fest. Welcome to meteorologist Bill Goodman from the National Weather Service in Upton on Long Island.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I haven't been here in a while. It's been a fun summer. Been away. Get my share of swimming in, share of music. Yeah, severe weather this summer wasn't really like what we've been used to the last few years.
No,
pretty quiet.
Very quiet, and also the fabric. Everybody was wondering with this La Nina year. Of course, activity is supposed to be well above normal, and something happened in the month of August that we had no tropical storms, no tropical depressions. Certainly was unusual, not unheard of, but unusual, and it hadn't happened in a number of years. I'm just kind of wondering, before we get started, because what we're going to do tonight, of course, we're going to talk about Fiona. Then we're going to talk about the local, the general weather conditions around the country and what we can expect going forward. And then we're going to try to tie that in to the next tropical wave in the Caribbean that looks like it may become a tropical depression or a tropical storm in the next day or two. But I'd be curious, Bill, what's your theory as to why it shut down the way it did during the latter part of July and the first part and for the month of August? Because I have my own ideas, but I'd like to hear what you think.
Yeah, well, I guess there were a number of things that were working against. I think there's a lot of Saharan dust around, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to remember myself. There was that. I think the phase of the MJO wasn't exactly favorable. That became favorable like right at the end of August, beginning of September, and then things lit up. So those are a couple things right there.
Right, the MJO, more affectionately known as the Madden-Julian oscillation. I would the only thing I would add to what you're saying is the fact that I did notice and this could be just simply the fact that the way the weather pattern was to begin with that set this all up with the regards to the dust. But I noticed through much of the month of August, tying this into the heat wave that occurred in Europe and the drought conditions there, that there were a number of upper air and mid and low level setups that seemed to bring down some of that dry air southward into the subtropics and even into the deep tropics. I noticed that throughout the month of August, for example, what we used to call the ITCZ, remember, the intertropical convergence zone, which usually in August it's set up somewhere between 10 degrees north and 15 or even 20 degrees north was down close to the equator. It was so suppressed. So I just threw in the idea that that flow of dry air just basically suppressed everything.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, just with where the position of the upper high would be, influencing the weather across Europe. I guess the return flow and a cyclonic return flow from underneath that would go across probably the Sahara, pulling a lot of dry air, a lot of dust.
And as you said, all of that changed when we got into the end of August, beginning of September. Usually, takes about a week for the atmosphere to just sort of get engaged. And now we have moved our way through the G storm, and suddenly we've had seven. Now we're up to seven named storms, and it's September 27th. It still is going to have to be a rather hyperactive period from here right through the month of October to hit some of these high numbers as far as total storms for the season, because the clock is starting to tick, and we are going to start eventually running out of time.
Well, I mean, October can be a busy month. We're past the climatological peak, which I guess you could say probably just happened with Earl and Fiona, and I guess this next system, which I guess is going to be Hermine, if something else doesn't go and develop in advance of it.
Well, welcome, by the way, to everybody on the chat board tonight. If you've got any questions or comments for Bill, by all means, put them on, and when I can, I will get back and take a look at them. If you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show and you're new, thank you. Subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button on your YouTube on YouTube, and hit the like button because we like to get likes on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So Johnny Quest, who's one of our regulars, brings up the subject of the undersea volcanic eruption that occurred, and then there was that one big burst that sent all this water vapor up into the air. Any idea that maybe that might have had some short-term impact or no?
You better fill me in on that.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to throw you a curveball. There was the Hunga Tonga eruption, which was an undersea volcano in the South Pacific, had a major eruption, and then there was a major eruption where it sent this huge ball of water vapor all the way up into the stratosphere. And I remember reading about the fact they were commenting. I forgot how big it was, but it was huge, Monty Python huge. And he wonders whether that may have had some impact or not. So maybe we have to lay that question aside and do a little bit of research. It might be certainly above my pay grade. It might be above your pay grade.
Oh yeah. Just stuff like that. I just pass along what I read and research if it looks like it makes sense. But that's down near New Zealand, I think. Is that where that?
I believe so.
All right. Yes, I did read something about it. I think it was some sensational article. Oh, the super volcano wakes up or something like that. Probably one of those tabloids had that headline.
Yeah, right next to the latest on Prince Harry. All right, let's start with. We're going to start with Fiona. I'm going to start with the satellite shot here, and I'm also going to get myself out of the way so you can see the satellite shot. This is the Caribbean satellite loop, so that you could see both the tropical wave to the south, and Fiona is at the top of the screen, and then we'll go to a floater image of Fiona. Still a well-defined hurricane. It looked a little ragged on satellite this morning, but it seems to have the satellite presentation seems to have improved a bit during the day. So it looks every bit still the Category 4 hurricane. Looking at this wider view, one of the things that's been going on is the outflow is creating northeast winds in the Caribbean, in the upper atmosphere, so that wave is experiencing northeasterly shear. But I'm thinking once it gets north of Bermuda, and now it's accelerating to the northeast on the last advisory, once it gets north of Bermuda, that shear is going to go away. So Fiona will be heading up toward the Canadian Maritime provinces. Once that shear goes away, I would think that tropical wave should develop.
Yeah, the shear needs to go away. And a lot of times when you have tropical systems that are that close to the South American continent, they tend to take their time developing. I don't know if they're just interaction with land or pulling in drier air. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which, but yeah, I would at least want to see it get clear of Colombia and Venezuela, and then we'll probably start to see it between that and Fiona pulling away.
So
Yeah.
I have I got Fiona up on the screen and still see that feathering on the outside, on the periphery of the storm, usually a sign that the storm is holding its own at the very least, or at this stage of the game, it's hard to make a case that it would strengthen much more because it's starting to move to the northeast quickly. The water is still warm, so I think we're at this point now where the storm's just probably going to hold its own. And Bermuda's on the upper right. And these floater images, by the way, so you might look at it and say it looks a little strange. It doesn't look like the storm is actually moving. The geography is moving. They keep the point is to keep the storm in the center of the picture, so everything else moves, and you can get a much better feel for which direction that the storm is going in.
Mhm.
I've just stunned you to silence, I guess.
Yeah. I'm trying to pull it up here because I don't see the graphics that you're showing. So
Okay.
I'm busy I'm busy frantically searching around in Nesdis, and yeah, I think I just got the floater image. Yeah, I mean, I guess as it goes up through the mid latitudes, you're going to see that cloud shield expand, especially with that cold front coming down. There's going to be interaction with the jet stream associated with that, and that's so this storm is going to. I mean, it's already a large hurricane, probably going to expand even further over the next 2 days.
Uh, Impacts along the Atlantic coast. The only thing we're going to have to deal with if you're headed down to the beaches, and I don't know with the cooler weather coming in that you're going to get that many people wanting to swim anyway. But it's going to rough up the ocean for a day or two.
Yeah, probably through the weekend, I would say.
Okay. And you can see on the upper left the showers and thunderstorms with cold front moving off the North Carolina coast. Here's what it looks like on the wide view with respect to on the U.S. satellite, because it gives you some perspective. You've got the cold front now has moved offshore. Got this beautiful dry air mass that's coming into the east. Can you maybe explain the process of when these hurricanes gain latitude and they gain far enough north, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit this morning. Um, there is I don't think the general public understands what a storm what when they say it's post-tropical or extratropical, what that really means from a practical standpoint. Um, you know, it leaves the impression I think wrongly that it leaves the impression that the storm suddenly is no longer a storm.
Yeah, I've sat in emergency management offices with other storms and seen things declared post tropical and overheard conversations. Oh, we don't have to worry about it anymore. If ever there's a storm that you have to worry just as much, this is the one. At least as far as Atlantic Canada is concerned.
Well, what actually is happening to the storm itself in this process?
Well, right now it's down in the deep tropics. You look at satellite, you can see that it doesn't really have any frontal features attached to it because there's no difference in air mass. As it moves north, starts to interact with the jet stream, you do start to and interact with the cold front that's approaching. Then colder air is going to start to work into the western part of the circulation. The cloud shield will expand as it meets up with the jet stream, with as it moves into the higher latitudes, cold and approaches like this cold front. You'll actually start to see what often happens is the winds on the southwest flank of the storm can strengthen. Usually, storms are moving northward. The strong winds will tend to be on the right side of the circulation as it when you move along with it. But that's usually a sign that that colder air is getting into the circulation, starting to interact with with the westerlies, frontal boundaries that are nearby. It'll start to actually develop fronts as it moves farther north. The precipitation will shift. Right now, it's a pretty circular-looking storm. Usually, when hurricanes move northward, the precipitation tends to shift to the north and west, especially west of the track, and all the strong winds tend to go to the east. So we'll see that. I don't think it'll happen right away. I think it's probably going to. I think is probably not till it gets north of the Gulf Stream will we really start to see these things start to happen.
And in this particular instance, in this particular case, this is going to be moving at a fairly high rate of speed once it gets north of 40 north. We were figuring out that it's basically going to move about 300 miles in roughly 6 hours, or maybe a little bit more than 6 hours. So it's probably going to accelerate to about 50 miles an hour. That does that slow the extratropical transition process down a bit because it's moving so quickly?
Well, I guess it can, because the storm doesn't have time to respond to colder waters underneath it. I think what happens in the upper atmosphere probably still takes place. So there still is some transition going on, even if it doesn't. Even if the winds won't have time to spin down, I think is the thing. Even as this rushes north. If you, I mean, this is really an interesting storm. I had. When I worked yesterday on shift, I had made a Facebook post basically saying this is not too much different from what happened in 1938, except it's how many hundred miles east.
Right. It's basically 10 degrees further east that it's happening. I would kind of I would agree with you, certainly in terms of the fact that it's moving it's moving northeast to northward. It bends back northward because of the interaction with the upper trough. We've been showing that on the upper air over the last couple of days, and the fact that it's moving so much faster now. I've got the hurricane model plots up on the screen right now. They are all pretty well clustered over eastern Nova Scotia. So just as an example, just as an idea of for the folks that are watching from Nova Scotia or from Newfoundland, because we've had people from Nova Scotia and Newfoundland watching the last couple of days. So if you're east of the center, you're going to get more wind and less rain. If you're west of the center, you're going to be getting, and I want everybody to listen very carefully. When I say less wind, that does not mean no wind, but you will get the stronger winds are going to be on the east side, and the heavier rain is going to be on the west side, with a little less wind.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I wouldn't let my guard down on the western side. I did. The strongest, most damaging winds will be east of the center, as the storm undergoes this post-tropical transition, and you do start to interact with that front that's off to the northwest, pull colder, drier air into the circulation. A lot of times you do get an area of very strong winds that develops on the southwest flank. I don't know if that happened, let's say, in the 38 storm, but I've seen it all the time. I think it happened with Sandy. This is actually the way it's bending back. You could even say that this is sort of like even has some similarities to what Sandy did, just not as drastic a turn.
Right. Now, in terms of wind gusts on the east side, because of that momentum, I would imagine that there are probably going to be some gusts up when I say triple digits, I'm not implying all the way up to 999 miles an hour, obviously, but certainly could see gusts to 90, 100, 110 maybe on the east side.
Yeah, I think that's very possible as it gets into Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island. Especially the exposed areas right near the coastline. They'll really This is Hurricane Juan's impact when it hit there in 2003 was kind of concentrated because it maintained its tropical characteristics all the way to landfall, which is it's pretty rare for that to happen in Nova Scotia. This is going to be this is going to be a much more widespread wind event.
Well, at a point it's becoming extratropical, then the wind field actually expands. The strongest winds will, you're not going to have 130 mile an hour sustained winds near the center like you do in the tropical system, but you may have, you could have a rather large area of sustained 75, 85 mile an hour winds spreading out from the center.
Yeah, I think so. And then you throw tropical storm force winds on top of that. I think as this goes into Nova Scotia and even some areas in eastern Maine, we'll probably see some pretty strong wind gusts. That's how big the circulation will get.
Now, I've got I'm bringing up on the screen. It's funny. It's been very difficult to get on Tropical Tidbits the last couple of days because everybody is on it looking at all this stuff, which is what in a big way, that's a wonderful thing because people are interested in weather and wanting to look at all sorts of different maps. But you're crowding the server, and poor Levi's having a tough time here. I'm looping the upper air, looking at this upper trough. It's really fascinating how the bottom part of that trough just literally grabs and goes negatively tilted, and suddenly you've got this mega wrapped up upper low that represents Fiona moving on shore in eastern Nova Scotia.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. We saw something similar with that with Hurricane Sandy. Probably would have if we were doing upper air launches all the way back in 1938, we would have seen the same thing here. To me that stuff is really fascinating. That's part of the post-tropical transition. It's no longer its own entity, especially in the upper atmosphere, because it starts to interact with big systems like existing troughs. So
yeah, it's fun. I'm looking at the 10-meter wind map, and just judging from the wind field, it looks like it actually. You mentioned about Juan maintaining tropical characteristics even after it made landfall in Nova Scotia. I'm looking at the wind field here. At this will be, I think it should be 18Z. No, Saturday morning. I'm sorry, it's at 8 a.m. Saturday morning, with the center sitting right on the coast at about, on the GFS anyway, at about 46 and 61. If you look at the wind field, it's still structured more like a tropical storm than it is a non-tropical storm.
For the most part, you do start to see some clues. Like if you look at I'm looking at Weather Bell right now, just at the wind swath of the swath of the wind gusts. Some of the things that you start to see when there's this extratropical transition, you don't have a circular wind field anymore. You actually start to, I think as this thing makes landfall, you can see like in the wind swath that you do start to see stronger winds develop on the left side of the circulation, even as this thing is racing northward into Nova Scotia. You even see I guess this is maybe the frontal boundary actually wrapping into the cyclone, that there's an area of lower winds that actually develops just to its northwest. So little things like that are like telltale signs that it's not a purely tropical system anymore. I think it's tropical enough, probably all the way to at least Sable Island, and then after that, it's to me, it's the name game after that. The classification game. It's important in terms of understanding these storms. I guess there's probably, but there is the public understanding or misunderstanding of what that means, and there's probably a lot of insurance companies that care very much about how the storm is classified at landfall too.
A lot of when they rewrote all the coastal policies where with hurricane deductibles. So if they make it a non-tropical system before landfall, then the hurricane deductibles don't apply.
That would be huge. I'm thinking you have a 1938 type system going to Long Island. I can just imagine the the Hurricane Center saying, okay, it's post tropical. I mean, yeah, that's just.
That was certainly applied with Sandy when they made it post-tropical. Then the insurance companies could not exercise the hurricane deductible. The hurricane deductible clause. A lot of people's hurricane deductibles are 30, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. That as opposed to maybe on their policies they're sitting with a $500 or $1,000 deductible. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's talk about something that's outside my pay grade. That's about all. That's about all I want to comment about that.
Sure. I have the. Go ahead.
If it, I guess there's the common sense part of me that says if these winds were created by something that was once classified as a purely tropical hurricane, that's in the public's eye, it's not going to matter to them. But as far as like the strict classification for science and for
right
insurance purposes, it's a huge deal.
The recon is there right now. Pressure down to 932. 932 and northeast of the center, because if heading for Bermuda now, you're going to want to really look at what the winds are going to be east of the center, because this should pass. The core is going to pass northwest of Bermuda. Bermuda's not going to get into the core of this.
No, it isn't. But the storm, I mean, just the size of the storm, I think they certainly will see, wind gusts probably 90 plus miles an hour, at least 90 or 100, even with the storm passing as far northwest as it does, maybe sustained hurricane force. I'm sort of looking at at least the European model forecast. That's not sure if how close that is to the actual Hurricane Center forecast.
All right, on the recon observations at flight level, I'm guessing that this is on Tropical Tidbits. He's got the 4 graphs that show the measurements in the at flight level in the center. The measurement at 23:10, so that would be at that was at 10 minutes after 7 Eastern time. The pressure looked like it touched 930 millibars, and the peak winds were around 105, maybe 110 knots on that first pass that they made. Let's see what the new advisory is out, so we might as well take a look at that. So on the old advisory, just as reference point, it was at 30.4, 69.5. Top winds 130, moving northeast at 20. On the new advisory, get the new map here. 30.8 and 69.1, still carrying top winds of 130. And let's see what they actually put on the actual public advisory in terms of the pressure. 932 millibars. That's if you've got a home barometer, that's 27.52 inches. So I'm going to just come back full screen for a moment. Hang on a second. I will take care of bring you up full screen as well, and then we'll go back to the maps in just a bit. This gives me a minute to at least make sure everything is working technically, and it seems to be, because I don't see anybody saying any complaints here on the chat board, so that's a good thing. So Bermuda deals with what they deal with, and Joe and I have been, half kidding and half not kidding, and I always find it remarkable in past years when Bermuda has been hit with, they've had a number of major hurricanes pass near Bermuda, and a couple of them that went over Bermuda, and you might see news reports of the damage the next day, and then you see videos of Bermuda like a week or two later, and it's as if it never happened. Everything is repaired, everything is fixed. They are very, very resilient, and they just get on with it. If there's whatever the issues are, they take care of it, they fix it, and they move on. I always find that remarkable, and I imagine that will probably be, judging Someone yesterday on the chat board said no on my comment on the video on YouTube. Commented about the fact that we're pretty strong stock up here. Uh, we'll have a we'll hunker down and get a bowl of chips, and then we'll deal with whatever we've got to deal with afterward. Uh, it's very hard. One of the hardest things for me in these sorts of things is just how do you explain this? Somebody wants to know the practical answer to questions along the lines of, well, what kind of damage am I looking at? And that's, I can't answer that question. I don't know what kind of, that always frustrates me because I don't know how to answer that. I don't want to leave the person feeling as if they didn't get anything out of all of this.
Oh, so I mean, in Bermuda, I imagine one of the reasons Bermuda bounces back so quickly is just the type of vegetation that's there. That it's just when you have storms like this frequently battering subtropical island like that. Let's put it this way: you don't have a lot of hardwood trees growing there that are just going to get blown down. But this thing goes into Atlantic Canada, that's going to be just with the size of the storm as it gets to Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, that's probably going to be a big tree blowdown. I know there definitely was with Hurricane Juan, and that was concentrated because the strongest winds stayed near the core of the system. This thing is just going to become huge as it goes north.
The models have been throwing out around low pressure numbers. Dub, who is watching from Nova Scotia, I think from Halifax, on the chat board. I didn't make a notation of what the GFS did in terms of pressure, but I think it's got a 921, which seems just that seems a little bit much. The record, he says, was 940. Doable that this could be lower than 940 at landfall? You think? I mean, in terms of the practical outcome, it doesn't make much of a difference. It may not make much of a difference if it's say 940 or 945 or 935. But I mean, from a standpoint of setting a meteorological record in that context, 940 doable?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I'm looking at the 12Z European forecast. It's got 938 millibars as the center's already lifted north of Nova Scotia, and is it 12 hours before? It's 920 millibars is what it's forecast, and that's just that's incredible. Now, some of that is as it moves north, there is actually going to be some intensification at first when it interacts with the
upper trough. Absolutely.
And so that's part of that. That's what happened. That we saw that with Sandy. Then I think it weakens. It's going to weaken pretty quickly after that, just because moving over colder water, just the continued post-tropical transition. But it'll still be. Yeah, I could see that record being in jeopardy because of course the question is, will the storm move someplace where it'll actually be measured?
Right.
So if you're in Nova Scotia, get your weather stations ready. Those observations are going to be they're going to come in very handy. Going to be scrutinized quite a bit too.
I'm trying to see if I love this interactive weather service hazards map. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Here we go. You don't have the show running so that you could see the graphics that I'm putting up, do you?
No.
In a separate window?
No, I don't.
Okay. No, just wondering. So it's working out fine the way it is, what we're doing now. So Bermuda at the moment, I love this, the weather hazards data viewer, because it plots everything, all the obs, and it just makes it so much easier. Hamilton apparently is. I want to get as close up as I can just to see if there's anything other than Hamilton in terms of obs. But they are. If I can go 3 times, put all. Let's see what happens if I put all. Nope. There's just one observation, and that is on St. George Island. The wind is southeast at 30. They're not reporting any gusts there. They had the Hamilton ob was up here a second ago, but I guess it disappeared. That's the only observation that we have on the map right now. So I just wanted to check on that. All right, so let me get rid of it. Let me go back to the GFS. And of course, the showers, the showers and downpours up in Nova Scotia today, and in New Brunswick, and up in northern New England, part of that cold front. It is not part of the tropical system. Just to make that clear, because there were a few people that messaged me, and they were apparently just a teeny bit confused over that. All right, jumping over to the radar. Let's look at the weather in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic over the next few days. And I was trying to remember, Bill. It really has been a number of years where we've been getting these extended summers that run into the month of October. I think one of those years it actually ran almost to the end of October. Last year,
I can think of early November, so a couple of recent years where we had just some beautiful days, highs close to 80 degrees. Well, I love that. It doesn't last forever, but boy, as long as it lasts, I'm loving every minute of it.
well, this is the first time in a long time where we actually have an autumn-like. Well, it's not even autumn-like; it's autumn. We have an autumn weather pattern actually timed out with the astronomical arrival of autumn, which I believe was today, and it looks like we're going to be in a rather coolish pattern for the rest of the month, and probably into the first part of October, and of course that is going to lead to some interesting complications when we start talking about the next system. Looks like most of the showers are gone. There's a lot of instability that from earlier today. And the upper trough that's moving through the northeast, producing still some showers coming off the Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. Kind of looks like lake effect.
It's that time of year.
Getting there. Still a little precip left in southeast New England. We got some very strong thunderstorms right along the North Carolina coast, from Cape Hatteras south to Wilmington, and then further south into about Myrtle Beach. Then there's a break, and then there's another little complex that's heading for Charleston at the moment. All of that part of that cold front, which has moved through here. I have to say, here in North Georgia, the weather here in the month of September is astounding. I mean, I've lost track now of how many sunny days I've had. The temperatures are more than reasonable. I'm up in the mountains, so I have elevation. So I've been mostly seeing highs. I think today we got to the upper 70s here, and the nights have been cool. Been getting down into I had 5 nights in a row with lows in the mid to upper 40s.
Wow, wow. I guess it's our turn for that now too. A little bit more widespread than we'd had. I think we've had some nights where I think probably the Pine Barrens got down to the 40s. Not sure about here. Probably just 50. So this is big change, and it looks like it's going to be with us at least through the rest of the month. We'll see what. And then I guess that don't want to steal any thunder, but that's probably going to have some influence on what this system moving through the Caribbean ends up doing.
There are showers and downpours tonight from North Dakota west across much of Montana into northern Idaho. We're also seeing some showers on the radar as of 8:09 Eastern Time, in case you're watching this on a replay, in parts of eastern and central Nebraska. And then there's like a line of some showers from northeastern Kansas going southeast toward just south of St. Louis, and we're seeing some showers going on in parts of the southwest, with a few isolated flash flood warnings up in a few places in Arizona and up in northwest New Mexico. The Storm Prediction Center still has a small area of leftover marginal risk in North Carolina tonight, also up in southeast Montana, northeastern Wyoming. Over the next couple of days, we have no severe weather forecast for tomorrow. So we'll jump to Saturday when there's a small area of marginal risk being indicated for the southern half of Arkansas and extreme northern Louisiana. So usually this time of year, there's not a whole lot of activity going on. The 7-day rainfall from WPC doesn't show much. It's bone dry from, except for, well, even in eastern Maine, they only give them a quarter of an inch of liquid, but it's basically a tenth of an inch or even a hundredth of an inch or less up and down the eastern seaboard. The exceptions, though, are western PA and in and around and off the Great Lakes, both Ontario and Erie. Probably you're seeing the impact of that now with what we, quote unquote, lake effect that is coming through. Much of the nation looks kind of dry. We're seeing a big buildup of precip, and this takes us to next Thursday night, which at that point maybe this system is starting to have a weather influence in Florida. But it looks like some really wet weather in Florida for the next 7 days. And by the way, I didn't tell you this. Joe knows, as I told him yesterday, and the audience knows. Guess who's going to be in Florida next week?
You are.
Yes, but yes,
Hurricane Jason?
No, no. I'm 63. I don't chase. I barely walk. you know, especially with my ankle's healed, but with going through that. No, I got family stuff going on, but I will be down in Florida on the East Coast all of next week. So if we do get this tropical system, um, the I'll hopefully, well, for me, if I'm on the East Coast, then it goes on the West Coast. I'll get some weather, but I'll escape the worst of it. So let's go to the Western Atlantic. By the way, as these maps get load up for me, I'm just gonna. It seems to me that we had two typhoons just in terms of the general overall weather pattern. We had two typhoons that recurved near Japan or east. One recurved east of Japan, and of course it wound up energized. One of them energized a low up in the Gulf of Alaska. That was that massive storm that they had in western Alaska. That seemed to be the catalyst to sort of the ripple effect down the line atmospherically. That seemed to be the catalyst to develop this deep trough in the eastern part of the United States.
Yeah, I think so. This is one of the other forecasters was remarking about that and saying that what was going on with that probably just contributed to some of the difficulties and forecasting tropical cyclone tracks that with Earl and Fiona. And initially, you have all that energy moving up, into Alaska, northwest, the northwest Canada, and then I guess dropping down toward here. It's like that's just a lot. A lot that can influence the entire mid-latitude flow, even downstream. So, I guess it had its influence, but things seem to have settled down for the most part, except I guess longer range. Looking at least looking the western U.S. and into the Pacific, there is an amplifying ridge over the western U.S. and then a trough over the Pacific. That's probably going to have some influence on what happens down this way. Going into about a week from now.
You see the upper air. By the way, I guess not everybody's looking at the 500 millibar map on Tropical Tidbits because it loaded pretty fast. But you see Fiona passing northwest of Bermuda by tomorrow morning. It will be almost due north of Bermuda at that point, and then making and accelerating to the northeast. That leaves the westerly winds in the upper atmosphere going pretty far south, all the way down into North Florida and off the East Coast. There is a ridge. There's an upper high in Louisiana, East Texas. There's another upper high that is sitting east of the Leeward Islands, and this system is underneath that ridge. I don't see anything that will cause this to recurve uh, before at least certainly when it'll get to at least 75 and probably the 80-degree longitude before we see any kind of we'll start to see it go more northwest. But this ridge, Bill, is not particularly strong. So it should gain latitude in the Caribbean. The GFS up until the last couple of runs, and certainly in this run, uh, has backed away from the idea that this system was going to be so far south that it was going to take forever to get it up into the Gulf of Mexico, and when it does, it would have been west of 90. The model has really come around now to what the other ones have been doing, which is to be further to the east.
Yeah, as I see that in the 18Z, and I guess it's also has a deeper trough in the east, which it hadn't had, and it had pretty strong ridging. I guess a Western Atlantic, and I guess holding strong Texas and the Plain States. I mean, this would have just had to find the weakness, and probably would have just sat around somewhere in the southeast for a few days once it got up, toward making landfall and thereafter. But yeah, this looks different.
The upper feature, and I've just brought up the North Atlantic 500 so we can see how it relates to what's going on in the United States. Very, very impressive cold flow out of Canada. This is the map for this coming Sunday. Rather strong jet from Canada that goes off the Mid-Atlantic coast and out to the east. The whatever's left of Fiona at that point, the post-tropical cyclone, is weaker and in northeastern Labrador and probably getting ready to go on its merry way further northeast from there. The tropical system is south of Jamaica by a fair distance, and it looks like there's an opening there to take it toward the Yucatan Channel or even toward western Cuba. The GFS really starts to develop this as we head into Monday and Tuesday. And this is on Tuesday. It's on the western tip of Cuba, and it turns it northward and then northeastward, making a landfall on the Big Bend, around the Big Bend of Florida. Now I'm looking at the upper air over the northeast for early next week. So there's another trough that's coming in, another upper low, rather strong upper low over Lake Huron that moves into the northeast. So certainly it's going to be, except for Sunday when we'll warm up a little bit ahead of the next front. And by warm up now, we're only talking about temperatures getting back. It'll be in the 70s. We'll get the cold front to come through. That's going to turn much cooler again as we move into Tuesday and Wednesday. It looks to me like this is what the difference is between the GFS and the European, where the European seems to want to hold on to that second trough in the east longer and take this thing into South Florida and then offshore the East Coast and take it all the way up towards, as you know, on today's run, take it all the way up to Nova Scotia. The GFS is different in that it takes the second trough and starts to pull it out, and then there's another trough that's coming down into the northern plains that seems to lift this up east on the east side of the Appalachians and moves it northeastward. Which do you think, or maybe neither? Maybe it's neither one. Is the European wrong in not pulling that trough out in the east?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's right about that, but I think the GFS is more than likely wrong about just how progressive it is with getting that trough out of here. It's GFS is almost always off to the races, and this just looks like a classic case of it. I think we're pretty good. I think we're pretty good probably till about Monday or so. Then the European, I guess, when the European lags energy back, say, I guess like Tuesday or Wednesday, where you still have a piece of the trough that's sitting back. I don't know if that's going to play out, and that that'll be a really big deal. If that piece of energy is there, like the European forecast, then you have a potential problem going up the coast with this, with the tropical system. If that doesn't lag behind, I think the westerlies are going to probably dominate more and probably at least it won't get pulled in close to the coast. It would probably either go out to sea or if it if it headed up toward the Big Bend, of Florida, that it would it would take its time moving up the coast, like we'd seen in like I think today's GFS had shown.
Yeah, I have the 12Z European. I just flipped over from the 12Z GFS for the same time frame, which is next Tuesday. I mean, it's totally different across the Great Lakes and across New England. It's got a very deep upper low sitting in eastern, right over Lake Erie. And the actual trough axis with it's broad. So the flow is basically southwest from North Carolina. Just draw a straight line from North Carolina to Newfoundland. That's the flow offshore, and the European with this strong trough extending all the way down. The last height line is in almost to northern to southern Georgia. It creates a big weakness in the Eastern Gulf, so it winds up taking this system and moves it across western Cuba and brings it right over the Florida Keys. And then the trough going forward, as we take a look at it, let me just get rid of this, and you'll see that the part of it, what it does, what it seems to be doing is that part of the trough pulls out to Maine and points east, but then it's got another arm that comes down and picks this up and lifts it up northward as that trough, swings eastward. It's a totally different upper air setup than what the GFS has.
Yeah, and that arm is what I question. I think that's just so far out in time. I can't have any confidence whether that would actually play out. I think there will be a big broad trough in the east at least through Tuesday, like you were saying. I guess the other question is European right with its track towards going across western Cuba and then towards South Florida with the tropical system. That might be a little bit too far east. I think the European had an eastern bias with Earl and Fiona, at least initially, till it caught on, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of weird. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because the last number of days watching this. I'm no the GFS almost always is to the right of the European, and it's been the exact opposite these last couple of days. Which I thought was really strange. And then I also noticed back a week or two ago when we had Hurricane K in the Pacific, it was the GFS was furthest to the left, and the European was furthest to the right. It's almost, we know in the winter months, certainly with the winter storms, it was not a rule necessarily, but it was always in the back of our minds when we looked at the models that the European would almost always come in left of the GFS. And not necessarily be right, but it always came in that way. And to see it do the opposite was very strange this week.
Yeah, and I don't think it's talking with another forecaster. I don't think it's verified very well. At least with the farther out in time. I think once you get closer and we're in the shorter range, then it's been doing better. But I think especially beyond 5 days, I think it's probably too far east, the European. And the GFS might be too far west, with that trough being where it is and ridging off the east, you would think its path wouldn't go across Yucatan or anything like that. It would be more toward like maybe the Yucatan Straits or maybe right across the western tip of Cuba. And if you move the European west toward that position, I guess that's your compromise.
Well, by the way, that the Canadian split the difference between the GFS and the European and took it right up the coast to Long Island and into New England. Just so you know.
This is so far out, and anything could happen. But the weather weenie and everybody wants to see that kind of thing happen. But realistically, I don't know if it will.
Yeah, I have what the Canadian did, and I have it up. The Canadian and the European were actually very close through 144 hours, taking it in over the Keys, over western Cuba, into the Florida Straits to the Keys, and then along the Florida East Coast to to south to between Savannah and Charleston, actually brought the low inland and then turned it northeastward, a remnant low that I take it back. It's got a the whatever the low that represents it sitting in eastern over Chesapeake Bay and in what looks like almost like a frontal boundary with another wave that forms out east northeast. I must have been looking at an old Canadian run when I saw that moving it straight up over Long Island. Maybe that was the overnight run that did that. But uh, I kind of thought initially when this all started, when the models were starting, my initial view on this was that okay, either it's going to go up the east side of the Appalachians or the west side of the Appalachians. I'm thinking we could almost the idea of it going up the west side of the Appalachians at this point. I think that probability may be going down. But what we don't know is, like you said earlier, I mean, this thing could still wind up doing whatever it does in Florida or in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and then because of the upper air structure, winds up getting kicked out east northeast, and it doesn't impact the weather up in the northern mid Atlantic to southern New England.
I mean, yeah, even that could happen. I'm still not. I'm happen to be looking at the Canadian right now. I'm not even convinced that this is going to be necessarily going up the east coast of Florida. Could be, could go right up the peninsula. Could go the west coast of Florida. Hopefully that won't be Tampa's worst nightmare if that happens. That's a concern. I just don't think we know. I'm kind of for splitting the difference, but maybe leaning more toward the Canadian and European. Maybe like a 2-1 in their favor. So maybe this thing, it's not going to be fun if you're in Florida, I would imagine.
Yeah. What was it? Tony Gigi said said that when the Canadian and the European are showing the same thing, that that is if you're checking boxes off, as far as trying to gain some confidence in the forecast, that those boxes get checked off when those two models are similar. In terms of the 500, though, they're not similar because the Canadian is more like the GFS, where the first trough pulls out and then it waits for this next trough dropping into the plains to lift it up to the northeast. So uh, I just go back to that question: Is it real? Is the European realistic in holding on to the trough the way it is in the East? Because that may be the ultimate driver in how this all plays out.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important thing. And right now, I don't know. It's just way too early. I mean, we're talking about stuff that's how many days in advance are we looking at? We're looking at something that's almost. I guess we're getting into like
another week. Well, we're looking at Tuesday, September. This is Tuesday morning. Next Tuesday morning, it's making landfall. The Canadian and I think the European also. Let me bring that map back up. I mean they both have it near the Keys next just coming Tuesday. And that's in 5 days. And if it's going to be something along, an issue for the East Coast, I would imagine that would be, later next, maybe a week from today, might be a good time frame. So it is a week away, and there's still a lot of time for this. The upper air is going to evolve some more, so it's still going to get fine tuned. But I don't think you're going to take anything. I mean, it just doesn't seem logical to me that this thing is going to go into the Western Gulf. Which is what some of the earlier models were showing, and the hurricane model guidance with this at 18Z, there was it was a fairly large. There don't seem to be running all of them, but it looks like the cluster. I always like to look to see where they're clustered. They're all east of 90, and the majority of them are actually east of 85, and you've got 4 of these models actually at late in the forecast period, either moving north or northeast into Florida. The northernmost comes in at Tampa and goes out south of Jacksonville, with the arrows pointing northeast from there. The ones that are furthest southeast has a landfall. I would say probably Fort Myers, or maybe just to the north of Fort Myers, and another one further south from that coming over Key West, and then getting ready to go into that corner in Southwest Florida. So they all seem to be going in that particular direction. And the intensity guidance, by the way, has um, most of these intensity models have it at least as the Cat 2, and you've got a fair number of them. One, two, three, four of them. One, two, three, four of them have it as a Cat 3 or higher. Two of them get to Cat 4.
This is at what position now? Is this in the Gulf or is
No,
this
this would
in the
be
Atlantic?
no, this is in the Gulf. So this would be between 96 and 120 hours.
Okay.
Are you familiar with are you familiar with some of these models? Because some of them I have no idea on. Like because they label each one of these on the intensity models. One is labeled Icon, so I'm thinking that that's the Icon model. The HWFI I recognize. The LGEM I recognize. But there's a couple of models here I have no clue on. The CTCI, the DSHP, AEMI, the CEMI, and then there's the UKXI. Is that the UK Met? I have no
Yeah, I
idea.
would imagine so. Usually, isn't there? There's no key to explain what.
Wait, which one is? No, there isn't.
Okay, yeah. I mean, some of them are statistical, or like. Then there's Clipper climatology and persistence, which if you can't beat that, you better not work for the Hurricane Center. um, there's all different. Yeah, there's I guess the GFS in there, the European UK Met. I guess some of them like that DSHP. I think that's the ship's model. Um, there's a bunch of. I guess there's some models that are more statistical based as opposed to dynamically based that come into those early tracks.
I just for laughs, I pulled up the Icon model, which for next Tuesday has it in the Florida Straits, but southeast of Key West on the 18Z run. It also has, by the way, a 546 thickness at New York City. So that deep trough and that next high uh, going to bring down some rather chilly air into the Great Lakes and Northeast and Ohio Valley and even down into the Southeast. I just went back to the 12Z run on the Icon because that goes out another 60 hours out longer to see what it did. So it looks like the position's about the same. It actually goes uh, near it straddles the South Florida coast to the East Coast. So it's basically sitting over Miami, Fort Lauderdale next Wednesday and just kind of crawling offshore. I'm waiting for the maps to finish loading. 71. It's moving northeast at that point. So, you kind of look at this, and I'm going to flip the upper air just to, give another, put another something else into the equation and trying to figure all this out. But let's waiting for the upper air map to load here because I'm kind of curious to see what would happen from here. But I mean, looking at the surface and the way the thickness lines are showing up. Here we go. Here's the upper air. Yeah, I mean, it kind of looks to me, if you look at the icon, that well, I mean, it looks like it would probably get kicked out to the northeast. Instead of coming up, it looked like it would be going out. There's a trough swinging down through New England that's coming around. I don't know. That's another possibility. Part of the trough hangs back, not as much as the European. But you get some sort of secondary arm that swings down and around and picks it up and kicks it out to the northeast and it goes out to sea.
Yeah. That's one solution. Now, if you really want to see something for laughs, you take a look at the control run of the European ensemble, which has I guess apparently an even deeper trough to the west that captures this thing as it's moving north and basically has a landfall at Martha's Vineyard. So,
we
uh,
got we have a long way to go, don't we?
yes, we do. There's just so many pieces to this puzzle, and so that just goes to show how important any energy that lags behind, or that digs at the last minute. If the Europeans right about that, that could be it could be interesting. I think even the operational European had this next system going to had this system going to Nova Scotia.
Oh, solving puzzles. One of the things you decide that weather is where you want to spend your career, you better like solving puzzles, and the kind of like jigsaw puzzles that have 1,000 tiny pieces sometimes, or at least it feels that way. Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. So we got a long way to go to do that, and many model runs to deal with it. We're both back on full screen now, so I'm just kind of checking the chat board. One of our regulars, Ms. Fallerite, brought this point up to me, and I guess it'll be a plus. And I was speaking with someone else, given everything, with respect to oil and gasoline, that going into the Western Gulf would be a big problem because of all the rigs, or even into the Central Gulf. So from that standpoint, if it goes in the Eastern Gulf, there'll be less of an impact on rigs and gasoline supplies. But she was mentioning something about diesel supplies, so perhaps being impacted. So that might be something that folks might want to pay attention to over the next couple of days, with the developments of this storm, because they may have impacts on the oil market and the gasoline market and the diesel market. Everybody's the last number of months, everybody's paying attention to that sort of stuff.
Sure are.
Just running through the chat board here. I saw that Dub Dub, who's up in Nova Scotia, mentioned that. Where was it? Hang on, I'm trying to find it again. Here we go. Let's see. He mentioned that that some of the media was. I can't seem to find it. It just figures I should have just held it there instead of moving moving this thing up and down. Nope, that's not it. I'm sorry, but he mentioned Charlottetown and one other place as getting it the worst. And now I've lost the comment, so I can't see it. All right. Any other closing ideas, comments that you'd like to share?
I think that's plenty. We got plenty on our plate to look at over the next week, and can't settle on any one particular thing. Even in Nova Scotia, I mean, how can you even say where the worst impacts from Fiona will be? The models do cluster toward Eastern Nova Scotia, but even a difference in track of 50 miles could mean the difference between, say, Halifax or Sydney, where our favorite weather guy Frankie McDonald lives. He's probably
yes,
glory up there.
I would imagine. Matt McDonald says, I'm in Canada and I haven't seen anyone in the news or weather talk about potential evacuations in the area of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland for expected landfall. Why is that? Honestly, Matt, I can't answer that question. I have no idea, and I don't think Bill does either. I don't, we're not familiar with how the process works there when you guys have hurricane watches and hurricane warnings. As far as evacuations are concerned, I have no clue.
Yeah, I don't even understand. Like, I don't know the characteristics of the coastline up there. Is this thing going to be coming at high tide or low tide? I guess if there are some vulnerable areas, I would think Eastern Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. I
would think the South Shore of Newfoundland, if it's going to track to the west of them, I would think the South Shores, the southern shores of Newfoundland, that there would be some impact. But I don't know what that looks like. It's here we've got beaches, we've got there's I don't know what if fjords are the right way. I know the tidal action that goes on in Newfoundland and in and around Newfoundland is a lot different than what the tidal action is down here in the east.
Thing, We do. Let's see. The new moon is on the 25th, and that's so the astronomical tides, which tend to, I guess, at least in the Bay of Fundy, they tend to fluctuate quite a bit. I don't know if that's the case in the rest of Canada. Uh, there's going to be some. I guess there's potential for some big issues just based on what the phase of the moon is going into this.
Jeeper on the chat board said, on top of this hurricane, it's been raining all week in Atlantic Canada. We were looking at, so the ground is already soaked. We were looking at the potential for yesterday. The GFS was generating 6-7 inches of rain on the west side of the track.
Sure, that's possible. When these things move north, all the heavy rain just shifts. It almost gets flung to the western side of the circulation because it's hitting up against whatever mid latitude system is there. So that's where you're, at least aloft. That's your temperature differences aloft. They become great enough. You get you get lift, and you just have all this tropical moisture being flung back at that area. And it's also quadrant of the jet stream where you just have an enhanced lift in the atmosphere as it is. Yeah, that's quite possible. And even that, you said that it's been raining all week. Even that makes me think of 1938. That what happened in New England. It had been raining all week, even before the hurricane struck there.
Yeah.
This is going to be a big deal in Atlantic Canada. This is going to be one that gets remembered. I'm fairly certain of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. We had 2 super chat hits tonight. I think Leon Probisky is one of them. I can't see. Yes, I was right. Leon is one of them. Thank you, Leon. I cannot see who the other one is. So whoever you are, oh, there it is. Steve Lapointe hitting a super chat. Okay, we've got 87 likes. We've been on for an hour and almost an hour and 15 minutes. Can we get the likes up over 100, please? I think this show deserves 100 likes at least because of our friend Bill Goodman, who took the time out today to join us on the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
Thanks for having me. I love getting on. I think everybody's we're trying to make the show last until 9:03 because that's the time of the autumn equinox.
Oh, is it at 9? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. We're not going to go to 9:03 for that magical moment of when the autumnal equinox occurs.
When you can put an egg on the kitchen table and it'll balance. That's
yeah, exactly.
And other stories.
All right, we're up to 95. So can we just take it over 100, please? Just make me happy, folks. Take it over 100. All right, let me get to let everybody know what's going on schedule-wise. So normally on Friday nights we do not do a Joe and Joe Weather Show, but we will be doing a Joe and Joe Weather Show tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern, so that we can cover what is going on in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and update the local weather and the weather across the United States, and of course look at the next potential developing tropical system, much like we did tonight. We'll see what adventures the models take us on. I, of course, will be updating weather during the day. I have the Weather in 5 video that's put up on my YouTube channel. They'll be up. One will be up tomorrow. We'll do one Saturday. Normally Sunday, Joe and I do our show at 11 a.m. Eastern time, but Sunday's going to be a travel day for me. So at the very least, there will be no show at 11 a.m. I can tell you that for sure. But depending on how much, how well I do on time driving down the Florida Turnpike, maybe there'll be a show Sunday evening. If not, then we'll just have to wait until Monday. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Come on, 3 more likes. We're at 97. Give me let's get the 3 more, 98. Well, I'm not going to sit here and count it down.
Got 3 more. This is like watching Aaron Judge and Albert Pujols try to hit their home run. To get 61 and to get 700.
They said that someone posted earlier that they've already walked him twice.
Ah, come on.
Yeah, somebody just pitched to him. 99. One more. 102. Okay, we're good. So
There we go.
we could say goodnight. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it. Bill, thanks again for coming. You know, you always have an open invitation to come on anytime you want. Maybe we can have you on again um, in next week sometime when if this thing becomes something more serious for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. If your schedule permits, let me know
I'll
and we'll
take a
put you
look.
on.
I know I got some evenings coming up, but I don't know. I don't know how far that into the week that goes. So we'll talk. We'll talk offline. Figure it out.
Okay, very good. All right, folks. Thanks very much again. We will see you tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern Time, right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Good night, everybody.
Good night.